Title: The Crimson Tides, a Tale of Unrelenting Terror. It was a picturesque summer morning in the coastal town of Port Haven. The sun's warm rays painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as the townsfolk went about their daily routines, blissfully unaware of the impending horror that would soon grip their lives. Captain David Anders, a weathered fisherman with a salt-crusted beard, set sail from the harbor with a sense of unease gnawing at his gut. He'd noticed something peculiar over the past few days. The ocean waters had become an unsettling shade of crimson, and the seagulls' frantic cries filled the air. As he sailed further out to sea, the source of the crimson hue became apparent. A vast, undulating mass of red jellyfish, their tentacles trailing beneath them, stretched out as far as the eye could see. It was a sight that sent a shiver down Captain Anders' spine, for he knew that this was no ordinary phenomenon. The jellyfish had begun their relentless ascent from the depths of the ocean, an unprecedented migration that defied all logic. They moved in perfect unison, propelled by an unknown force, and their numbers grew with each passing hour. Back in Port Haven, the townsfolk marveled at the crimson spectacle, snapping photos and sharing their observations on social media. It wasn't long before the news reached the scientific community, and marine biologists and experts from around the world descended upon the town to study the phenomenon. As the jellyfish continued their inexorable ascent, they began to encroach upon the mouth of the river that flowed through Port Haven. It was a vital source of fresh water for the town, providing sustenance for its residents and serving as a place of recreation and relaxation. Dr. Emily Mitchell, a marine biologist who had arrived in Port Haven to study the jellyfish migration, was the first to notice the eerie change in the river's waters. They too had turned crimson, tainted by the jellyfish that had begun to infiltrate its depths. Dr. Mitchell sounded the alarm, urging the townsfolk to avoid drinking or bathing in the river until the situation could be assessed. Panic began to spread as the realization dawned that the town's primary source of fresh water was under siege. The jellyfish, seemingly undeterred by their newfound habitat, continued to proliferate in the river. Their tentacles, filled with venomous stingers, became a deadly weapon as they lay in wait, hidden beneath the crimson waters. It wasn't long before the first reports of strange occurrences reached the local hospital. Residents who had come into contact with the tainted river water began to exhibit bizarre symptoms: agonizing rashes, severe respiratory distress, and in some cases, paralysis. Dr. Sarah Reynolds, a dedicated physician, was at a loss as she watched her patients suffer. She'd never encountered anything like it in her medical career. As the number of cases continued to rise, the hospital's resources were stretched thin, and Dr. Reynolds feared that she was fighting an invisible and relentless enemy. It wasn't until a young boy, Lucas, was rushed into the emergency room that the true nature of the threat became horrifyingly clear. Lucas had gone swimming in the river with his friends, and as he was wheeled into the hospital, his body convulsed in agony. His skin was covered in grotesque welts, and his breathing was labored. Despite the efforts of the medical team, Lucas succumbed to the venomous stings, his life snuffed out in a matter of hours. Dr. Reynolds and her colleagues were left in shock, realizing that they were facing an unimaginable nightmare. As the town's water supply became increasingly contaminated, a state of emergency was declared. The military was called in to quarantine Port Haven, preventing anyone from leaving or entering the town. Panic and chaos gripped the streets as residents grappled with the sudden and terrifying reality of their situation. The jellyfish had become relentless predators, lurking beneath the surface of the river and the ocean, waiting for their unwitting victims to draw near. Animals that approached the water's edge to drink were also falling victim to the deadly stings, their carcasses floating lifelessly downstream. Desperation set in as the townsfolk faced a dire choice: remain in Port Haven and risk their lives, or attempt a perilous escape through the military barricade. Families were torn apart, and hope seemed to dwindle with each passing day. Dr. Emily Mitchell, Captain David Anders, and Dr. Sarah Reynolds joined forces in a desperate attempt to find a solution to the crisis that had engulfed their town. They believed that there had to be a way to stop the jellyfish, to break their relentless cycle of predation. Their research led them to a shocking discovery. The jellyfish migration was linked to a rare celestial event, a convergence of cosmic forces that occurred once every century. It was a phenomenon that had gone unnoticed until now, and it held the key to their salvation. As the celestial event drew nearer, the trio hatched a daring plan. They would venture out to sea, armed with a specially designed device that emitted a powerful electromagnetic pulse. The pulse was theorized to disrupt the jellyfish's migratory patterns and drive them back into the depths of the ocean. The night of the celestial event arrived, and the townsfolk watched with bated breath as Dr. Mitchell, Captain Anders, and Dr. Reynolds set sail into the crimson waters. The device was deployed, and a brilliant burst of energy illuminated the night sky. For a moment, it seemed as though their plan had succeeded. The jellyfish quivered and writhed, their migration disrupted by the pulse. But then, with a sudden and horrifying twist, the creatures retaliated. They surged upwards in a frenzied frenzy, their tentacles lashing out with fury. Dr. Mitchell was the first to fall, her body entangled in the deadly embrace of the jellyfish. Captain Anders and Dr. Reynolds fought valiantly, but they too were overwhelmed by the relentless onslaught. As the crimson waters churned with violence, the celestial event reached its zenith, casting an eerie and blood-red glow over the scene. The townsfolk watched in horror as the last flickers of hope were extinguished before their eyes. The trio's valiant efforts came to a tragic end. An eerie calm settled over the sea and the river. The celestial event continued to cast its blood-red glow over the scene, as if nature itself mourned the loss of those who had fought so bravely to save Port Haven. But the calm was short-lived, for something even more ominous was about to unfold. The celestial event, which had drawn the crimson jellyfish from the ocean depths, now summoned forth other ancient and malevolent creatures that had long slumbered beneath the waves. Emerging from the depths of the ocean came creatures of immense size and power, towering titans of the deep. These colossal beings, long relegated to myths and legends, had been awakened by the celestial convergence, and they rose from the abyss with an insatiable hunger. Among the creatures were mermaids, their ethereal beauty concealing their deadly allure. With voices like sirens, they lured unsuspecting sailors and fishermen to their doom. The mermaids, driven by an insatiable thirst for human souls, joined the relentless assault on Port Haven. Other titans, towering over the town like living mountains, followed in their wake. Sea serpents with scales like obsidian, krakens with tentacles that could crush ships, and colossal creatures with jaws that could swallow a man whole descended upon the coastal town. The townsfolk, who had survived the initial onslaught of the crimson jellyfish, now found themselves facing an even unimaginable threat. The once peaceful town of Port Haven had become a battleground, a place of unfathomable horror where human civilization was pitted against the ancient and malevolent forces of the deep. The Titan's rampage extended far beyond the borders of Port Haven. They laid waste to coastal villages and towns, their destructive power leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. It was a cataclysmic event that would forever alter the course of history on the continent.